Good morning. Our first song out of the song will be number 473. Number 473. But first we'll have our video song at this time. There is victory in Jesus, number 473. Our next number this morning will be 499. There is sunshine in my soul, number 499.
Good morning, everybody. I'll be reading from the sixth chapter of John. And we find in John that Jesus is arguing with the Jewish people about him being the bread of life. And they were asking for a miracle. And they bring up that their forefathers, that Moses fed their forefathers in the desert. Starting with paragraph 32, Jesus says, I tell you the truth, it was not Moses that has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. And later on in the chapter, they're arguing among themselves about being able to give his body of the flesh. And in the 53, he says, I tell you the truth, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. For whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him at the last day. For my flesh is the real food, and my blood is the real drink. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me, and I in him. And so they just could not pitch back around about figuring out about Jesus giving his blood and his flesh as food. And as we know, as we come around the table, that he was talk about him being our bread of life and his
Father in heaven, we thank you for these few moments we've had to reflect upon the sacrifice. You've asked us through example to remember you on the first day of the week. The fact that you were willing to send your son. Your son was willing to come, and your son was willing to go to the cross. We pray that as we've taken these moments, we pray that we reflect back upon that great sacrifice. We thank you that we have a moment that means so much, with meaning, with significance in our lives, knowing that through the blood we can be forgiven. And many of us through the blood have been forgiven. And we live a new life because of that forgiveness. Help that to be our identity. Help us, Lord, not to be caught up in the world and the titles and the accomplishments and things of the world. Things are so significant, but help our identity as Christians to be just that. Forgiven and saved, a Christian. And on the road to heaven because of forgiveness. Help us as we look at our lives, Lord, to know that we as humans have fallen short. Help us to work on our other places. Help us not to be satisfied with sin when we know sin is there. Help us to be encouraged and motivated to try to draw closer to you. Knowing that even though perfection may not be possible in this life, but certainly improvements can be made. Help us to please you more with our lives as we go on. We thank you for life. We thank you for opportunities. Help us to take advantage of those, Lord, as we have days left, possibly years left, to make impact in lives, Lord, that are lost. Help us to be the reflection. Help us to be the light. Help us to be the salt that someone needs in this dark world. In Jesus' name I do pray. Amen. Good morning, everybody. If you can't tell, the seasons are changing just a little bit, it seems like. Just a little bit of a change, a little nip in the air, so we know God's in control, so we're all good, right? A couple of things just to cover on our bulletin here. Do we have an update on Judy? Judy did go through bypass surgery on Thursday, and I know Vanessa spoke with Gary yesterday, and she may not be able to come home until Tuesday, but there's definitely some issues with her. Pretty rough, I think, kind of on the recovery stage at the moment. Went in there with the atrial fibrillation and so on to try to help Judy out in a couple of ways there. So do we have an update by chance or where we're at? Okay. So thoughts and prayers. Best case scenario is she might be able to come home on Tuesday, but again, I do believe at the moment certainly the bypass surgery was successful. Several things to remind us to be in prayer. Linda and her family with the loss of her brother. Marianne with her heart issues. Good to see you back. And then Mom this week had a little trouble with some eye infection and some work there. So she's told me this morning it's getting a little bit better. So thoughts and prayers with everybody there on our list. Most of you know that the Molten Jamboree was his last few days, and the church did distribute free ice cream cones, I guess, last night, as I understand. And ice cream cones were able to be picked up there at J&L. They're at the store, and they were compliments of the church. So if you happen to have somebody come up to you and thank you for the ice cream, tell them you're welcome. And it's from the church. And oh, by the way, we're not trying to buy your vote, but you're welcome to come see us anytime. So just a kind of a way to get our name out there in the community and hand out some free ice cream on a night that I'm sure it was appreciated. Thanks, and very thankful. All right. And on that note, that's kind of a sign of kind of an encouragement to start the Wednesday night class for the kids now that Jamboree is over and school's back in session. Starting this Wednesday night, 7 o'clock, we will start our program for the kids. So that, again, will pick up. So if you know of kids that are interested, able to come, let us know. The two vans will plan to run back and forth to Molten to be able to pick up any kids that would like to make it on Wednesday night. And In relation to that, there is a sign-up sheet on the back table for cookies for Wednesday night. There's a lot of blanks open. I think this week is covered, but down the road, there's a lot of blanks. If you'd like to help out with cookies for the Wednesday night kids, we definitely would appreciate that. Reminder there, the Sisters Retreat coming up here, first Saturday of October, October 1st, so that's getting here a lot closer than we think. And then this afternoon at 1 o'clock, our fellowship dinners will start, the season will start out at the campgrounds at 1 o'clock. A meal will be served, and then at 2:30, the first Singspiration of the year, sponsored by the Albia Church. Any updates? Any additions? Would you like to add to our list today? Yes, Linda. Okay. Okay. So you lost a brother and a nephew. Okay. Thoughts with you, Linda. Thoughts and prayers for sure in the family at this time. Okay. So at this time we'll have our special number, Kinsey and Melinda. We'll have that special at this time.
walking with me all this time. Oh, 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 oh. You've been walking with me all this time.
Thank you, ladies. Page number 213 will be our song Will Hold. 213 is the song we'll hold for our closing song this morning. Fiery plane crashes, billowing smoke, contorted metal, mountains of rubble, burned out fire trucks and police cruisers, the walking wounded, the dead bodies, the sight of people jumping from dozens of stories to escape a burning inferno, the anguished, broken-hearted people as they search desperately, hoping to hear from their loved ones, the weary and the collapsing rescue workers. The images go on and on. Reflections of 21 years ago today, 9/11, 2001. We've all seen those heart-wrenching pictures, videos, and these images are burned, at least in my mind, for as long as I live, as I look back and see in my mind that awful day. And even though 21 years has gone by, and I know if you're not at least in your mid to late 30s, it means nothing to you. But for many of us, it seems like yesterday. And today, if you go home and turn on CNN or turn on the History Channel or whatever the case might be, you can watch it all over again, all day long. Again, it'll seem like yesterday. The images are still there. It's real. It happened. But why? That was one of the questions many people had after 9/11, was why did not God intervene and stop such a malicious act upon our soil? Certainly he could have. We know that. God's in control of all things. But the slap in our face where hijackers came into our country, trained in our facilities, went to our airports, hijacked our planes, and chose selfishly to kill our people and destroy our properties. Why? We may not know all the answers, but we'll look today at some lessons that we can learn from 9/11, lessons hopefully that we have learned or lessons we can remind ourselves. Back in Psalms, the psalmist penned a perfect chapter, even though it was written thousands of years before 9/11, that would be a perfect fit for this. Now, we don't know exactly where David was at here in Psalms chapter 27, but it seems like the hints are that his enemies had abounded around him. And he felt that he was in trouble. He felt that the country was in trouble. And he was crying out to God, but yet he knew God had the capability to protect him. But he was reaching out to God in a desperate manner. Psalms chapter 27, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Whom shall I be afraid? When evil men advance against me to devour my flesh, and my enemies and my foes attack me, they will stumble and fall. Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then I will be confident. One thing I ask of the Lord, this is what I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, to seek him in the temple. For in the day of trouble he will keep me safe in his dwelling. He will hide me in the shelter of his tabernacle, and set me high upon the rock. Then my head will be exalted above all the enemies who surround me. At his tabernacle will I sacrifice with shouts of joy. I will sing and make music to the Lord. Hear my voice when I call. O Lord, be merciful to me and answer me. My heart says of you, seek his face. Your face, Lord, I will seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You have been my helper. Do not reject me or forsake me, O God, my Savior. Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. Teach me your way, O Lord. Lead me in a straight path because of my oppressors. Do not turn me over to the desire of my foes, for false witnesses rise up against me, breathing out violence. I am confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord. In the land of the living, wait for the Lord, be strong, and take heart, and wait for the Lord. Many of you remember 9/11. Many remember the reactions of 9/11. Church attendance that Sunday, they say, in places more than doubled. 9/11 was a Tuesday. By Sunday, 5 days later, it was extremely fresh. Smoke was still rising from Ground Zero. The Pentagon was still had smoke rising. The Shanksville fire had been put out, but it was fresh. And everybody wondered, what's next? And remember those days probably. They were able to do that. What was coming next? And people were turning back to the Lord. Prayer was up. Church attendance was up. But we all know the rest of the story, and that is it didn't last, did it? It wasn't long, just a few weeks later, that even though it was fairly fresh in the minds, we turned around and kind of gone away from the need to have God. The push to have God back in our country, in our prayers, and in our attendance at church. This morning I want us to look at a passage in Psalms 46:10. As we step back and look at some lessons, it says, "Be still, my soul. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." This is the psalmist writing, asking us to be still and learn lessons we can learn from 9/11. We ask the question why, and sometimes we don't get an answer. The scriptures are interesting because sometimes God's direction and his mind are very clear. It was very clear why God sent the flood. He was angry at sin. It was very clear why God chose to have the Israelites continue to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. Because 10 out of the 12 spies came back and said, we can't do it. There was no prevalent faith among the Israelites after they'd seen all that God had done for them. God wasn't big enough to take care of the enemies after all the plagues, taking them across the Red Sea and seeing all the benefits of following God. No, we're not big enough. God's mind was clear there. He was angry with his people. We see God's mind at work when he sent his son to the cross. It was very clear. It was to save you and I from our sins. But a lot of times we don't get the answers from God that we like to get. We don't get an answer to the why. We don't get the answer for the why. But first of all, let's look back on that day and remind ourselves a little bit, again, of the details that happened. 4 hijacked suicide planes were coordinated. The morning of 9/11, 2001, 19 Al-Qaeda terrorists hijacked four separate planes and intentionally crashed them into 2 buildings in downtown New York City, World Trade Center. They also sent a 3rd plane into the Pentagon. And the 4th plane, as we know, was likely intended for the White House, possibly the Capitol. But as we all know, that fourth plane was overcome by passengers who rose up, overtook the hijackers, and the hijackers drove the plane into the ground to commit suicide and kill everybody on board. Nearly 3,000 victims, 19 hijackers were dead by the end of the day. 2,753 victims died in the World Trade Center. 343 firefighters and 60 police officers died on that day. 8 private emergency medical technicians and paramedics were also dead. 184 people were dead at the Pentagon, affecting people from over 70 different countries. You can ask yourself, what was your day like that day? We all have a story, I'm sure, where we were at, what we heard, what we saw, and what we felt. The question we can ask ourselves is, what did we learn? It had temporarily been a wake-up call for the church and society in general. Right before that, there had been placards out that "In God We Trust" was being questioned. They were trying to take "In God We Trust" off of our coinage. It was being challenged in courts. We couldn't display anything that had scriptural reference in public. But what was interesting is the day after, or the day of and the day after, you could see signs everywhere. God bless you. God bless America. God bless the USA. Our president and congressman quoted from the Bible, many different places, many different congressmen, even the president quoted scripture. Prayer was back in public view. That Friday was encouraged to be a day of prayer for our country. Even in school, kids were asked to pray, or at least have a moment of silence, as the thoughts went back to remember what had happened on that Tuesday. The NFL, NASCAR, the stock market were all closed because that really wasn't that important compared to what we were facing as a country. You notice the Democrats and the Republicans and the Independents all joined hands in one common cause to try to figure out where we were at and what our best plan of action would be going forward. But did it last? Was it long-term effects? We can look back and we can see and remind ourselves of what happened, but let's move forward and look around, and even though we don't get the answers from God's Word, maybe look and see possibly why this might have happened, in a lesson or two maybe we can learn from it. We've already mentioned that some things happen that are bad in the world because it is a judgment of God. We mentioned the flood already, the fact that God looked around and said he was disgusted. He was fed up. Men's hearts were evil continuously. And he thought, I'm just going to destroy the world. But save the fact that he found Noah, we would all not be here, nor would our great ancestors be here. God saved the world because of one righteous man. That's a moment where God's thought process is recorded for us. Genesis 6, verses 5 through 7 makes this very clear. The Lord saw man's great wickedness, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was evil. The Lord grieved. He was sorry that he'd made man. And he was filled with pain, the fact that he'd made man. So he said, I'm going to destroy mankind. I have created him, and I'm going to destroy him from the face of the earth. God was angry. Think God gets angry with sin today? Obviously, that's a possibility. It could have been a direct reaction to the direction of our country. The decisions our country had made, God possibly, and some would say likely, was punishing our country for the actions that we had taken in direct response to try to eliminate him from our country. Also, some bad things can happen because simply we live in an imperfect world. And in an imperfect world, bad things happen all the time. I don't know how much you like to be in control of things, but honestly, as we all know, especially as we get older, there's certain things that we just can't control. Certain things are out of our control. Romans 8 points this out, and that is, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed in us. For the creation was subject to the creation, to the frustration, and we know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. It makes it very clear in Romans that as beautiful and as wonderful as this world is, it is not, intentionally not created to be perfect. Because it's full of imperfect people. And God gives man free will choice. And man makes free will choices oftentimes that are not in accordance with God's will. And sometimes they, and sometimes all of us, face their decisions, face their actions, can affect all of us. Have you ever stopped to think why God did not create this perfect world? I go back and I think of what the Garden of Eden had to be like. I mean, it was just no weeds to pull, beautiful, everything was perfect. Imagine the fruit was the freshest it could be. It was a perfect place, but man ruined it because of their sin. And God promised once they were driven from the Garden of Eden that life was no longer going to be perfect. I think maybe sometimes it's God trying to get us to realize that don't get too hung up in staying around this place. And probably as we get older, we probably should have more reaction in that way, and that is, this is not the best place to, I would not want to live here forever. It kind of gives us a little motivation to think about the promises that he's given to us where heaven is perfect. And what a nice change that'll be from living in a life in a world that's so imperfect to a world, heaven, that we were created to be perfect. Some bad things also happen because of sin. Because of the sin of our lives and the sin of others. Our society today has drifted so far, in many cases, away from God and become so godless. People trust in their wealth, trust in technology. Sexual immorality and gross immorality have become acceptable. Pornography is everywhere. It's like an open cesspool that can invade our homes. Television, internet, video, magazines can all pollute our minds and ruin lives. Life is cheap with abortion. Lying and cheating is rampant. Dishonesty has become the norm. Greed is there. Self-satisfaction, desires rule the day. And that's just a little snippet of what many people are like. And that is, we live in a very sinful world. And Galatians 6:7 reminds us this. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man sows what he reaps. I think that verse applies to us personally. And to get paid for the actions that you perform in life. Of course, we can meet the blood of Christ and be forgiven. But oftentimes, there's still a price to pay if we've harmed our bodies or destroyed our health. But oftentimes, sinful nature of other people affect us as well. I like the NLT translation on this. It says, don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of God. You will always harvest what you plant. That's pretty clear. We all know how seeds work. You want to produce a certain crop, you plant a specific type of seed. And so many people think that they can plant certain seeds and get a different crop. We know that's not true in agriculture. God promises that's not true in life. And unfortunately, the sin that people choose in their life can cause them to make decisions such as were made on 9/11, to act in such a way. It's a possibility without the understanding of God and God's grace. Some bad things happen in our world also because evil exists. And this is also a very strong possibility. Right after 9/11, Secretary of State Colin Powell was asked, why would anyone want to do such a terrible thing to the United States? His reply was because they hate America. They hate what we have. They hate our lifestyle. They hate our religious beliefs. A country that was founded on godly principles is hated by certain segments of society in this world. And I think that was clearly the motivation behind the whole plot, was the fact that our religion didn't line up for the most part with what they thought was the proper Muslim religion. We're not here to disparage the Muslims in any way. This obviously is just a small segment of society that decided to attack us and kill people in the name of religion, and that certainly, likely, in fact, did indeed play a big part in the decision-making process that went behind the hijackers and the planning of 9/11. But that's part of life. We sometimes are affected by the evil people around us that was very present on 9/11. James 4, chapter 1 through 3 reminds us, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You want something but don't get it. You kill and you covet, but you cannot have what you want. You quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with the wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your own pleasures. James is reminding us that oftentimes our motives do not match up with God's will. We live in a world simply where fighting is prevalent. Evil, war, has been around nearly as long as man has been around. Most people tend to want more than they have, and they want what other people have. What other countries have, some countries are jealous of. And I know they look at the United States and are very jealous of our way of life, and their hatred leads, oftentimes, or can lead, to violent reactions on their part. So where does such hatred come from? You would think down in the heart of any man, you'd have a hard time justifying such an action, to take innocent lives, innocent children. Most people could argue and think that probably the only mistake, the biggest mistake they made on that day, was probably the attacks came just a little bit early. Had they waited a little bit longer, they could have taken out many more people. And so a lot of people were still going towards the locations that were bombed. But it was a very, if you go back and look at it, it was a very well thought out plan on their part, very coordinated. And again, any step along the way could have been, if something had happened, any step along the way, it could have been stopped. But we know that God allowed it to happen for a reason. Where does this hatred come from? John 8 points it out, says, and this again points to all of us at one time before we were saved. It says, you are all children of the devil. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language. For he is a liar and the father of lies. People who do not follow God will listen to lies and act upon the fact that they think they are doing the right thing because they're not following the one true God. Devil's alive and well. We see him at work every day around us. Ephesians 6:10 reminds us that we need to gird ourselves against the wiles of the devil. We won't take the time to read that, but it talks about the armor that we need to put on as a Christian. Because the devil is out to get us, especially if we have a target on our back as Christians. We need to arm ourselves, be prepared for the attack. 1 Peter 5:8 says, your enemy, the devil, is like a prowling lion. He's looking for someone to devour, and he wants you because you look good. You look meaty to him because you are a Christian. He's got most of the other world. He's got those people. He's looking for you. He's looking to devour you. He's looking to devour me. Looking back, looking around, we can also look up. We shouldn't look down. 9/11 is over. We could look into ourselves, but we don't have the answers personally. We could look inside all we want. But we need to look up. There's a point in life where man's intelligence and reasoning runs out, and it's time to turn it over to God. Man cannot solve all the problems. Man needs God. It's kind of like when your lawnmower breaks or your washing machine goes on the fritz. You could call a repairman or maybe get it fixed. Man can kind of handle those things, but when you're told you have cancer or when you lose a loved one, that's the time to look to God, not the time to look to man. It's time for us to learn to always look up in our time of trouble. Apostle Paul reminds us of this. Apostle Paul was so helpful and was so fruitful in his efforts to win Christians on his journeys. Apparently he had something that he felt physically was holding him back. So he prayed to God, says, 3 times, for God to remove this thorn in the flesh from his body. It doesn't say that he's sought medical help or maybe he had, but he knew that he needed to look up. This was a problem that he felt was holding him back. And God's answer to him was, my grace is sufficient for you. I'm not going to heal. I'm not going to change whatever situation it is. Put your faith and trust in me. We'll be fine. And that's where we need to be. That's where a lot of the world, at least a lot of the United States was on 9/11. But this is where we as a Christian need to continue to be. And that is looking up, not looking within. James chapter 4, verses 13 and 15 reminds us of the fact that we never know when we get up in the morning what that day will bring. September 10, 2001 was like any other day for most people. And the morning of September 11 started in a similar fashion. You think about all the different stories, and you can hear the different stories of people that were killed that had one last chance to say goodbye to their spouse or to their kids, and something happened and they didn't get to tell them goodbye that morning, or maybe they did get to spend time with them that morning when they normally didn't. Stories abound, but none of those people knew that was the last time. We're all in a situation like that today. And that's, I think, a huge lesson for us to remember, and that is that we do not know what the day holds, be it this day or be it tomorrow. James 4 says and reminds us of this, today or tomorrow, people will say, we're going to go to the city. We're going to spend time there. We're going to carry on business. We're going to make some money. He tells us, don't you know what tomorrow will be like? What is your life? You're a mist that is here for a little while and then vanishes. First Chronicles echoes that. Our days are like a shadow. There is none who abide. So all the lessons we can learn when we look back and remember that day, remember where we stood that day, remember our reflections that day. We can look around and try to understand why possibly things like that would happen, why something so evil would happen. We don't have answers. We can only speculate. But the biggest thing we learn from it, and that is no matter what, we look up. We look up. We look up because that's the only one that has the answers. And we live our life, hopefully, with increased faith, increased understanding, and an increased desire to hand our will and our life over to God, who can direct, lead, and provide. 21 years ago today, hope we all take time to stop and reflect. Remember the trauma of the day, but go past that. Go past that and understand that for some reason God allowed it, but there's lessons for us. And this side of heaven, we'll probably, obviously, never get the answers. But let's trust God in His divine providence and understanding that the lesson is there for all of us. And ask for Him to increase our faith and our trust in our daily life and live our lives, knowing that if tomorrow doesn't happen, that we are ready. We are ready. We are so ready. 213 will be our closing song. The line in here says, because he lives, I can face tomorrow, and that should be a growing sentiment among all of us as Christians, that he's in control. Let's all stand. We'll sing the first verse of 213. Dennis,